Yeah.
So I felt the alarm go off, which basically says, idiot, you, it's not a matter of pre-scripting it, right? And saying, oh, well, if this result comes up out of the 800 possible permutations that could come up in these rolls, this is what they'll do for every one of those 800 permutations. That's not useful. I need to have a
Yeah.
bank or perspective on those characters and the prevailing circumstances that allows me to make flexible decisions.
Yes.
And that
And
is what I'm not hearing you talk about because it's
right.
difficult to talk about. So
Yes.
in that squishy space, we got our two black
I'm still
pans, we've
figuring
got
it
our
out.
squishies, and
Yeah.
what are the principles, standards, contexts, frame of mind about that character if you know you're going in and you don't really know if they know or don't know? What is it you consult at that moment? Because if you don't have something to consult at that moment, you'll hear the alarm go off, which is saying, whatever decision you make, you're storytelling. Because
Yeah.
it's only
So
about what's about to happen next. It's not about what's going on.
I think that there's so I've only done it once, so I'm still figuring it out, but
Mm-hmm.
I totally 100% agree with everything you said, including the thing about, yes, there's obviously certain things that they don't know for sure and things that they know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much the case, right? So for example, there's this a clue of like the one of the characters who's secretly a poisoner brought in the plant that she wanted to use as a backup to poison people if the negotiation went south. That plant was used to poison the alchemist, but not by the girl that brought it to the castle, right?
I seem to remember this. This
So
is your setup for the crime, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
this clue is like this plant is quite smelly,
Mm-hmm.
and so in the preparation, Lorenzo decided certain characters had heard the smell and had complained about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that like pretty much anybody in the castle
Right.
could have.
Right. It's not just
So no,
these.
sorry, I said
Right.
heard, felt,
The
smelled.
smelled.
Sorry,
Correct. I
the
understood.
word in
I
Italian is
understood
the
what you meant.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
But
word for hearing and smelling is the same in Italian. Sorry.
right. No,
Um,
that's okay. I got
but
there. Mm-hmm.
yeah, but it's that almost anybody in the castle could have smelled the plant, right? Um, so at some point, I just kind of naturally decided,
Well,
hey,
they
like,
smelled it. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
maybe this
yeah.
guy smelled it and he's going to complain
Right.
about it,
So
and
you
that's
were
kind of it.
working off of information that you thought was that you seemed to you very straightforward, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Now, but to recognize that if you didn't have something like that to consult, then you would be basically intuitive continuity making decisions
yes,
for certain things to be different in a way you wanted later.
yes.
So
So the
good.
objective in deciding these things is,
I try to minimize this. That's why I said an alarm bell, right? I mean,
yeah,
I don't minimize it by, I'll repeat myself, I don't minimize it by pre-planning every possible outcome, which incidentally is why I get very frustrated with people asking me super deep level edge case questions about Champions Now and Circle of Hands. It's like, if
yeah,
you need to ask that, then you're not even understanding the perspective that you need to have on situations during
yeah,
play.
yeah,
And so, because that's where you do have to make decisions and you should have a mindset about it and a viewpoint, an understanding of how information works in this game. So that means if you're asking that you don't even have that. So I can't even answer.
yeah,
So not getting into the trap of saying, all right, well, I'll just plan for every imaginable contingency of any question they could ask any person, right? Which is just
yeah,
insane. And any rolled outcome, okay, I've got my little, flip, flip, flip. Okay, he says this thing going on there. And so instead, we say, what are the criteria where I can check myself before and during play? Am I ready to make flexible decisions for
Yeah.
these characters. Now, there's two kinds. One is the kind I was talking about, will or won't they attack? That's about their behavior. You're talking about something which is a little stickier, which is the presence or absence of information. And so that is, I think, requires more circumstances and perspectives and context than less. So it's harder basically, or how am I going to put it? It's easier to be in the bad zone when we're talking
Yeah.
about the available information. In
So uh, these are the criteria that I think I was using.
mm-hmm,
Um, I think first of all, the relationship map of all the NPCs is extremely clear to me.
mm-hmm.
No information that gets added this way can contradict that. So
Right.
if
Is
I
that
think,
person sleeping with someone who knows?
yeah, exactly. So if I think this guy is a crook, if I can't know that I can't have the proof that he's actually a very upstanding citizen, right?
Right, right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
if or maybe if I know it, I don't believe it. I
Right,
think it's made up,
right,
right? Um, the if I think that um, and the other thing is that I think situations should change as a result of interacting with
of course.
NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
So either through their action, so something that the players say, that the detectives say, makes them act in some way,
Right,
or that they get new information. So
right.
I think if obviously there can be a case where, like, yeah, sure, this guy just doesn't know anything, right?
Well, that's just in that
And
band. We're talking about in the squishy zone.
right.
Yeah,
So, but if there's a chance to provide some level of information or clue, even if limited, because if you
yeah,
fail the roll,
yeah.
I'm just gonna tell you, haha, he had a
Right,
weird look, right?
right, right.
But deciding in that moment, um, it allows me to more actively push forward not the agenda of the
No, no,
game,
I know,
but
but the actual events that are occurring. Yeah,
the underlying situation that needs to come up
this is
one way
critical.
or another.
This is critical. What I had in my back pocket while you were talking to see, in case you didn't get there in the conversation, and you have, the way I
Yeah.
was putting it in my mind, in my back pocket, is that the non-player characters are experiencing this scenario just like the player characters are. And if we are
Yes.
several scenes along, who's to say that people have not been speculating and talking on their own? So maybe at the
Yeah.
beginning of this scenario, this guy probably wouldn't have known this thing. But come on, there's
Yeah.
been like all these events and a second murder or God knows what, right? All sorts of
Yeah.
things.
Oh, we have
All
the
the
second
right. Well,
murder.
hold
Yes.
on.
We.
But do you see what I mean? For this NPC, things are
Yeah.
different now too. So
Yeah.
now they may well have graded into the point where like, oh, well, he didn't know in the beginning, but look at all this shit that's happening. Look who this guy is and who he knows. Oh fuck, he knows now,
Yeah.
right? Or at least he has a strong opinion about it now.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually very important to recognize that uh, that if you treat them as changing and potentially dynamic in terms of the information, acquiring it, or having enough at least to speculate about it, or to perhaps have a wrong opinion, but that is at least, informed to some extent,
Yeah.
whatever it is that they may have developed along the way is actually extremely important. This is actually,
Yeah.
oddly enough, it does have its parallel in dungeony play. The idea being that if all of the rooms are just like frozen in time, time
If you haven't
capsules,
seen those kobolds for 4 turns,
right?
I wonder where they are now.
Exactly, right? Or
Yeah.
even more so, yeah, at the beginning of the at the beginning of this, session, the trolls are in this room, but they don't even know the trolls are there. The trolls, are there's no reason why it's not like the old school modules where you open the door and the trolls are, they've been frozen the whole time. Now they move right into however it's being described in that paragraph. Instead, no, the trolls have had the whole scenario to do whatever they want this whole time. So you have to think about, well, with all this going on and with the bloodbath that occurred, That's strange. That bloodbath occurred just next door to those trolls. Well, what would they be
Yeah.
doing, all this time? So all that is the same principle as saying that every part is moving and movable, and that in many cases in a scenario like this, the information will be filtering in possibly distorted form
Yeah.
across the NPCs, just like it's doing for the player characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing. I really like that the role is about something else. It's not about whether they have it. The role is about your interaction with them about it, which I think is
Yes.
really important. It's striking in orthogonally from that other variable about whether they know it or not. And I think that's
Yeah. And
really important
also,
not to mix those up.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also the other important thing is like you never roll for knowing, like you roll
Right.
for like how well, because the
Exactly.
detectives, they're going to get there, right?
Right.
They're
No, I totally get
competent,
that. I see
right?
what you mean. So the important thing here though is that the potential for incomplete and distorted information is present.
Yeah.
And therefore, again, as we say, if we're in the middle of the dependency chart, there's all
Yeah.
sorts of things, in the bigger end, the starting end, that they do or don't
Yeah.
have or do or have in funky shapes. And that is
Yeah.
fantastic. We don't want it any other way. The worst thing that could happen is if they figure every fucking thing out perfectly the whole way, right? There's no point in that.
Yes.
What's the point of that? They have no
Well,
basis for, there's no basis for decision making in the presence of complete information about everything so far.
I actually
Right.
disagree. I think if they get like very ahead of the NPCs, then they can make decisions before the NPCs can react, and they're
Well, I
like,
get
okay,
that
what are we
too.
gonna do
Right.
about this?
I get that
Yeah.
too, but the idea being that there are so many entry points in the starting end of the diagram that it seems highly unlikely that they would have them all nailed down. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I'm really referring to.
So I've been thinking about also this. I don't remember who said it. I think maybe you said it, but I think of like this idea of the power of coincidence. That authority is essentially the power of coincidence, in the sense that
The
you
power
are,
of
well, not all of
coincidence
it,
is
but
included in situational authority, and different people have different aspects of
situational
it.
authority.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So there's, when I decide where or what, like how a character is situated as part of the situation, right? There's like a range of things that are, again, I'm not gonna say reasonable, but they're
No, I get that. There's a
available
range. There's a range. Yeah,
for that
available is the best
character,
word. Right.
right? In the sense that they all could be justifiable paths taken by the character to get them to that point, right? And situational authority is the freedom to choose. Well, the act of choosing among
It's the
these.
act of choosing, because don't forget, in different systems we accept constraints about it.
Yes.
Right.
Well, in addition to whatever constraints you have, obviously.
Exactly. Once we establish that, that's good. So it's not about deciding versus rolling. That's not the
no, not at all. Not at all.
Okay,
it's
good.
about
So
establishing it.
Keep
right?
going. I'm just clarifying the details as we go. So keep going.
So, and being that backstory is like a part of situation, essentially, we can do the exact same thing. Like there's nebulous parts of the backstory that weren't important at the beginning that they become important later.
Right, because all of a sudden,
at the moment that they become relevant,
who would ever have
situation,
wondered whether the cook knew that thing? And through the vagaries of everything that's happened, all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, we kind of do need to know whether the cook knows this thing, right?
Yeah.
And so which is fine.
If you're respecting whatever else has been contributed before by the other players, and you're respecting the constraints of the system, then apart from that, then you have
quite a bit
choice, right?
Yeah, you have quite a bit to make.
You shouldn't feel
with. Yeah,
and that's not.
Wait.
And I think a lot of people get.
Hold on. I lost your connection for a minute. You jumped, and I didn't hear that last sentence.
Oh, okay. So I said, if you're respecting the whatever everybody else has said authoritatively before, including yourself, as a constraint, and also you're respecting the constraints given
Right,
to you by the system,
subroutines. Yeah.
then everything else is your free choice. And that's not intuitive continuity, that's just playing.
I completely agree with you. And that is an exceptionally important point. You'll now realize, I hope, if you haven't already, or I'm sure you have, why I get irritated when people call that precise act fiat.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not fiat. Yeah.
So it's really about like, because then people start thinking about, oh, you need to make everything up. It's this anxiety. It's the same thing that Lorenzo is going through with it. You think he's going to learn as we play together, but we don't know. So I prepare everything, and then all of this everything is fixed in place, and suddenly I'm tying my own hands. Right. But it's comfortable because I don't need to take the responsibility for it in play.
Well, the trouble is, though, is that there are always gaps and cracks that will occur and may even form as you go along, and then you're going to find yourself there anyway. Right.
Yeah.
So it's inescapable.
It's over constrained.
Yeah. It is inescapable that you'll find yourself in that decision-making space sooner or later. And that is when you get these utterly prepared scenarios because the person says, screw it, I never want to have to do that. Or, we're just going to map it all out exactly as it's going to go.
Yeah.
Which is what we're trying to avoid here. So I think that's making a lot of sense. Can you tell me about how without getting stuck in the weeds, can you tell me about how that applies in terms of the scenario, the play event that didn't go as well? So we can look at what we learned from that. That's what I'm interested in.
I think in that case, so first of all, I think the players were a little bit thick.
Wait, say that. You think the players were, say that?
Sorry?
Start again. You think
they were a little bit thick.
Okay.
Like, they didn't get what was going on, even with kind of quite a bit of information. But that's fine, because I think that the game should work even if they don't get it. Right? I think what happened at a certain point is that I kind of, maybe I was tired, or maybe it was these players got me to the state, but I got into kind of a, when you're like, you'll regress. Like, I played like shit myself. Like, I went to a previous state of like 2012 Claudio, and actually I was playing better in 2012, 2014, 2016 Claudio, and I stopped giving good information on failed rolls, and also we were going way too much with like whatever the players were asking. So essentially, one of the things that I'm realizing as well is that
meant they were trying to guess.
To be moved.
They were trying to guess what they were supposed to know, and you were going by what they were. Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They were trying to guess things, even though we rolled. They were still like trying to guess things as if the roll didn't matter, right? And I went with it, right? And I don't know why.
Right.
So and also
I can see why that. I mean, this kind of thing happens to me all the time, right? And all of a sudden I'm saying, hold on a second, I just fell in love with an upcoming interaction, and look at me trying to wiggle us toward there. Stop it.
Even though I explicitly say at the beginning of the game that this game is not about guessing clues. Like, that's the characters do that.
Yeah, but if the characters are role playing it and you get excited about that, then you'll find yourself. That's not. You're right. The game just needs to be robust in the presence of that. Right. That's fine.
The other thing is that certain players had like a very uncomfortable relationship with the narration authority. Kind of the usual stuff that you see in the pool, all of the stuff we did in the course. I saw like 4 or 5 of those problems.
So somebody succeeds, gets narration, and then they start trying to fill stuff in. They try to start putting in content that's not part of that.
Yeah, and one other thing is that in Inquest, you get narration if you have a double success. That's it. There's no choice. There's no post choice,
Right.
or if you get a double success, you need to narrate, and like all of that stuff like happened. Like
Right. Right.
half of the list of the pool stuff happened. So there was like a lot of discomfort with exactly what is the outcome here, right?
Right.
Because I'm just like, well, we're all at the beginning, and then we kind of play the scene out. So you got two successes, so this means that, you know, you get a lot of information. So it means
But
that
the
whatever you ask,
content of the information still needs to be coming from you, and that's what they were having trouble understanding.
yeah.
Right. Right. I can understand
So
that.
we had this kind of like, and then as soon as I started talking and giving them the content information, they stopped talking. They're like, okay, I'm done. He took
Right. Right.
he got the right to speak again, so I need to stay silent. Like, you need to finish this.
Yeah, I'm just telling you what to
So
talk about. I'm just like the info guy here. You're still selling what
yeah,
happens. No, I know what
and
that means. That's a very
but
interesting phenomenon. I think there's only a learning curve. You're only going to succeed
I
through that with a learning curve and not get sucked into their perspective.